this period we'll have to ask any questions or share any reports about our experience. Anything is fair game, from the talk I gave or what happened in your practice. It's pretty broad and open, so if anyone has a question, please just raise your hand and or want to share anything, please do so. Paul.
I am finding during, I've gone through kind of an arc, like when I first arrived here, I had a lot of thoughts about the outside world, and they were convincing enough to, when thinking, even be aware, I'm thinking I should go back to my object of awareness. But I'd rather not, actually. Seems more important right now. I'm going to think. And then I overcame that at some point and said something like, I'm here to practice, and it would dishonor my being here to have that be more important. And for the past 2 days, I've been preparing to leave for a few days, and thoughts are winning again. They're more convincingly important to me. And in this state of awareness right now, I can say, oh yeah, meditate, great, that's more important. But when I'm in the throes of it, they win. Curious if any guidance, something to do there.
Well, yeah, it's tough. On one hand, I would say maybe there's some wisdom, some compassion, something important in this thinking, and it's usually not completely random. Sometimes maybe, but not. It's usually there's some cause or condition of why it's happening. So you could always do more investigation and look into it. Is there just some specific nugget? I know for me, when I'm sitting and if I start having, oh, this is a great fundraising idea, and then blah, 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 blah. Actually, that's how the boot camp got formed, was I had it during a meditation sit. But then just logically I work it out of, okay, I've done everything I can do by myself on a cushion. The rest of this work is going to require talking to people and looking up stuff on a computer. This is just, I'm not going to gain anything more by thinking about this. And that sort of logic for me, I have a master's in philosophy, so that kind of logic for me is like enough to be like, this is clearly illogical and stupid if I keep thinking about this. So, not always, especially if it's emotionally charged, then that's not enough for me to stop thinking about something. Sometimes it's emotionally charged, so here we do practices that do emotional clearing, and sometimes it's useful to look, oh, I'm like really scared that someone doesn't like me because I disagreed with them, and I've been thinking a lot about how they're a bad person. Okay. And now I just have to feel sad or fear or whatever it is, and then maybe it'll go away. Or you can do this very direct meditation cutting thing where sort of just brute force, you just say, oh, this is a dream, this is a dream, this is a dream. And obviously sometimes if you're in the throes of it, that might only occur once every 10 minutes or something. But there's no I don't know if there's a quick magic trick to this, because as Sorya says, this is why it's so important how we live our lives, because it's going to directly impact our meditation. And this is also why I stressed insight, because until insight happens, there's always the danger that this could easily happen again. We can go really deep in meditation and concentration, and then we're just placed in a certain situation, and it feels like I'm just like the same person I was like 10 years ago or something. So insight sort of undercuts the basic assumptions and ways of looking at things as a default mode, and then how you live your life just provides different conditions, who you're around, who you hang out with, what you do. That's the same thing as your meditation practice. There's no difference. So there's that. And there's, to some extent, there's just sort of like, we actually covered this yesterday, but in a very confusing way, that if I start thinking about something, I'm basically like feeding it, and it just grows. And if I don't feed it, it will starve eventually and go away. And this is why when we do our silent retreat weeks, the first few days could be really difficult, but eventually you're not really feeding it as much. And so eventually it sort of just starts dropping off naturally. And so, actually this is a great question, because this is actually a point I've been wanting to make a long time, which is, the Buddha clearly said you should really guard your senses. You should be really cautious and aware that the entire world is trying to get you addicted to it. And it's not actually the world, it's our own compulsions and addictions inside ourselves. But we see something, we like it, and then we indulge in it, and now that's become an addiction. Doesn't mean we shouldn't appreciate beauty or something, but as soon as we start clinging to it and going, wow, that's really good, how can I always have this every single day, things like that. Now we've clinging to it. Same thing with hearing, same thing with feeling. And so for a lot of us, we're here on our schedule during the formal awakening periods, and we're like, I'm going to give up everything and really practice. And then as soon as we say it's free day, or we go into Burlington or something, and then it's just like, I've been working so hard the other 6 days, so I should be able to indulge in everything or something. It's not true. I mean, it's not because it's not trying to say anyone's a bad person. It's just, it's most of the time, I would say, a coping mechanism that is going to become its own trap. It might be a better trap than other coping mechanisms, but it's still a trap. So you want to upgrade your traps to get better and better traps, and eventually you don't want any traps. And so, Buddhism is an amazing way of looking at things, because it's one of the few, if not the only one, that tells you it's a trap from the beginning and wants you to get out of all the traps. But you need to, the metaphor story it gives is, if you're in prison, the entire way out of prison is still in prison. You can't get out of prison without going through prison. And there are ways that lead you more into prison, and there are ways that lead you out of prison. And so maybe sometimes indulging is you're upgrading to a more healthy form of getting out of prison. And sometimes I think we're not doing that. So you want to be careful and cautious with, am I indulging to the point of where I'm going to get attached to this and cling to this? Or is this actually relief and relaxation and, recuperation? That's a really important distinction to make. And it's important not to go on either extreme where you start just hating yourself and tightening up. And it's also important not to just indulge and, get attached to everything that's pleasurable. Hope some of that was helpful. Yeah. Yeah. Coach.
On that same point, I find when I'm working with indulgence, I sometimes just start feeding anxiety and self-hatred instead. Like anything like, oh, I shouldn't eat this, I shouldn't eat that, and blah, maybe I can't have too many rules, maybe I'm a bad person in that way. Look for any guidance in that.
Yeah, it's tough. I noticed even on my retreat towards the end that I used what I started calling emotional asceticism to motivate myself whenever I felt like I was slacking. And as you said, it led to sort of a subtle self-hatred and tightening. That's not actually helpful. Maybe it is. I don't think it is. Maybe it's a growing pain or something. It might be an immature way of dealing with attachments. And again, I read a lot of Buddhist texts when I was in the cabin, so I'm just going to quote the Buddha a lot and draw from Buddhism. But as we all know who've done sutra study here, the Buddha originally spent many years as a prince, living the indulgent life, being provided with all the pleasures a person could imagine at that time, and then realized, oh, well, people get old and get sick and die. That's not good. That's a problem. Whatever pleasure I have now, I'm gonna get sick and die, and not only just me, but everyone I know is going to get old and sick and die. Now, in modern times, we just sort of push that out of our memory, and we put people in hospitals and retirement homes, and we just say, the most important thing is that I don't die painfully or something. But those of you who've ever had someone, we lose someone close to us and we go to their funeral or something, there's a real sense of, oh, that is not the most important question, is whether or not I feel pain when I die. The fact of dying is an important matter. So the Buddha saw that and then gave up his life and found some teachers that could teach him a thing or two. He learned really deep meditation, really deep concentration, but found that that wasn't resolving the fundamental questions, and then went to asceticism, where he ate, as the texts say, I'll just make it more relevant to us. Let's say he ate one Brazil nut once a week. One Brazil nut once a week. And to the point where his hair was all falling out and his teeth were falling out. He wasn't doing well. You could see all of his bones and ribcage and everything. And then he almost died, and thought maybe this isn't the right way. Maybe this isn't working. And then he found the middle path and got awakened, and we can be very grateful that he did that strong work, and now we have teachings that we can follow and be inspired by. And that was 2,500 years ago, which, really think about it, how many things 2,500 years ago are still a living practice, community, tradition in the world? There's not many. So it's amazing to be part of that. And so, like him, I think at a certain point, similar to Paul's question, we do enough repetitions where we realize, oh, I don't think this is actually serving me. I think this is actually a problem, maybe. And we try something else and see if it works. And if it works, we want to feed that pattern more and stop feeding the pattern that's not working anymore. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability and a lot of time and willingness to do that. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but just on average seems to. I don't really have a good answer for it. I mean, I've been here 5 years, so. But it's really good to just recognize, oh, this is suffering. What's the cause of this suffering? I have a mistaken perception that this will help me concentrate, when really it seems to be just tightening me up. Or maybe it's half and half. It's partly helping, reminding me to practice, but the other half is it's making me tight. How do I not do the tight part? And then that's the path part. As I said in my Dharma talk last week, when I said most of us are addicted to what we're familiar with, and I think in modern times most of us were educated to feel bad about ourselves, and so that's a very familiar feeling, very familiar way of going about things. And the fear is, if I don't feel bad about myself, then I won't do the right thing. I'll just be selfish and greedy and uncaring about other people. So it makes sense for me to feel bad because I have all these bad tendencies and habits. So I have to feel really bad to counter that, and then I'll do good things. And this is why Surya stresses why right view is so important, where he says there is giving, there is receiving. That if we have the mistaken view of that what I just said before is true, then it makes sense to abuse ourselves. But if we have the right view that that's not true, that innately, inherently, we're just bad people, as Darwin, well, not Darwin, but people who quote Darwin say, if we're all just fighting on a biological level to beat each other, then that kind of system kind of makes sense. But is it true? Is that really how things work? Because if that's actually how things work, then this community is doomed to failure. And that's a shitty world to live in. So part of it could be taking on faith and right view, noticing the ways that I'm interpreting and perceiving and understanding reality and experience, and then checking with wise texts and people and teachers of what they say. So when I was in the cabin, I might be sitting and I'd go, oh, this is painful, I don't want to do this. And I go, oh, this is suffering. And the Buddha said the first noble truth is to realize suffering. So if I resist this, then that's not following the first noble truth. And then I'll go, they talk a lot about intention and inattention, and that mind is chief. So maybe my body feeling painful isn't the primary thing, it's my mind that's the primary thing. So how am I paying attention, and what intentions do I have right now? And I notice, oh, my intention is half, I don't want to get up, I don't want to get up and move, because then I'm a bad monastic and I feel ashamed or something. But I also don't want to feel this. So I'm kind of practicing, I'm kind of not, because I'm split in my intention of, I want to have a good self-image that I'm doing this, really throwing myself in, and I also don't want to feel this. And so I had to realize that and then set a new intention of, no, I'm willing to feel this, mind is chief, the body is secondary, let's really test out this thing. And then, boom, something changes. So another one might be learning a more right view, and then applying it to your life and experience and your practice. That's all I got. Yeah.
When you were applying to Paul, you kind of talked about this idea of in kind of the awakening period, it's like you can kind of start some of your problems because you don't have to think about them, and then they eventually kind of disappear in a way.
Well, it's not just that you don't think about them, it's just they're not even available as options.
Right, okay.
This is almost like a addict recovery place. It's like, if you're addicted to drugs or something, you go to a recovery center or whatever, those options aren't there. There's no alcohol, there's no drugs, can't have sex. There's a lot of the options are just, there's people watching you all the time, so, You can't do a lot of things.
Right.
People aren't actually watching you all the time, by the way. That's not true. Most people are actually paying attention to themselves. They're not paying any attention to the rest of you, so don't worry about that. Anyway, please go on.
So my question's kind of related because so yesterday we did circling.
Oh yeah.
And Danielle and I both felt really bad after it. And we were kind of talking about this, that it feels like a lot of the things that come up during it are things that we're trying to kind of work through or release from ourselves. Things related to like ego or different ways of different problems and kind of attempts to kind of think your way out of them. But these attempts are kind of ultimately futile or they don't work, and which is why we like meditate and as a route through that. So I guess my question is that why circle? What's the, because it feels like it's kind of creating these problems or making these problems more acute than they are.
There's a theme among all the questions thus far about patterns and how to break them or how to deal with them. That's actually a really profound question you're asking. That is a profound debate, you could say, in world history. I wish these weren't posted on YouTube. Okay, let's see. I'll say two things. First would be, it was very helpful one time that we had someone here who was really struggling with the training. It might not have been compatible for them. They're really struggling. And during one of the sessions, they ran out of the room because it was too painful or it was hard. And Soryu said that person just gave a great teaching, that we're not here to create new suffering. We're not here to make other people suffer. That's not the point of this place. And so you shouldn't create new suffering. But there's a distinction to be made whether or not what's happening is that the situation is revealing suffering that's already there, is revealing patterns that are already there, or is it creating unwholesome new patterns? Or you could say feeding unwholesome patterns. I would say the practice of circling, the interpersonal meditation, a lot of times is holding up a mirror and showing us, and I kind of joined the end of your circle where we kept becoming self-aware of our own pattern. Oh, I just did it again. Oh, I just did that thing that I don't like. Oh no, I just did it again. Or usually someone else points it out. Someone else goes, is that it? Did you just do it? I think you just did it. And then they go, oh yeah. And there's both a sense of relief and freedom and possibility in that recognition. Just like Paul and Koshin said, I can realize I'm in this thinking process that isn't serving me, and now that I'm aware of it, I can choose a different action. That's freedom. Or, oh wow, I'm really emotionally abusing myself because I think that will motivate me somehow. I can try something else. That's freedom. And so when we do circling, it's a way to show both how we relate to ourselves and also often more times, how we relate to each other and patterning and default habits that we got often without consciously thinking about it many, many years ago and do automatically without thinking about them, without even being aware that it's happening. And so we can use circling to point those out and then recognize that's happening and go, oh, that's a pattern I have. And then change how we interpret it usually and then learn new ways of relating that are maybe more wholesome. And it's really easy for a lot of us to go, wow, I did circling and I just became a shitty person or something. Or I meditated and my mind's way more crazy than it is when I'm not meditating. And you go, is it really though? You know, is that what's happening? Because when we're meditating, we're just in a quiet, warm room and no one was saying anything, so. You know, circling doesn't have that much instruction or facilitation compared to a lot of other modalities. So I would say a lot of it's revealing. If you're in a group that's telling you things like you're a bad person, you should judge people really harshly, then you should leave that kind of group. But if the inquiry is like, what's it like now? You know? At least externally, that's a good group. Maybe the person has a lot of malice in how they're saying it or something, but there's other people. See, again, this is sort of right view. You could say that if you believed, well, people are inherently evil, then you could say, well, everyone in the room is ganging up on me and they're trying to change me and make me a bad person or something. But if we have right view and we go, I think deep down people actually are caring and want the truth. And if someone is holding bad intentions and asking questions that seem correct but are coming from a bad place or hidden place, then everyone else will sort of triangulate and give feedback and say, why did you ask that question? You know, where's that coming from? Why does that matter to you? I get scared when you ask that question to that person that you wanted to change them or something. So hopefully in a good circle that's happening and you don't have to worry too much about being fed bad patterns. But this is actually still, so that's the first part, is revealing patterns and suffering and finding, and then providing the space to choose new, wholesome ways, more effective ways, trading up your habits and patterning to better ways. Kind of like we're trying to get rid of one of these vans to buy a newer van. Trying to trade up so it has less hindrances and less problems. Just get to where we want to go for this big crack in our windshield. So there's that. But there's actually, it's a much more profound question because there are meditators, spiritual people who would say, you should go in a cave and just meditate. Don't be around people. People, it's too challenging, if not impossible, to get awakened while you're with people. And when you're relating with people, your ego is going to get activated. And so the most effective path is just to be alone in a cabin or something, or woods, and do that. As you said, your ego is getting activated or something. And you want to get to the point where you're completely still and everything is at rest and there's nothing and everything left. That's a very big orientation or attitude, definitely in spirituality and if not in every field. That sort of basic orientation exists and it has pros and cons. And a lot of early Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism, the earliest Buddhism, a lot of that is kind of like that. You keep hearing these stories in the sutras about so-and-so dwelled in a forest by himself or with 4 other people, and that's their daily life for years, maybe. And there's a lot of benefit to that. And there's a lot of traditions that do that. You go to their monastery and no one is talking almost ever. Not just in Buddhism, but in other places. And there's a benefit to that, there's a strength to that. Cool, okay? That's good. And then there are other traditions that emphasize more this, you could say, holistic approach, integrated approach that, as I was talking about earlier, that your life and your practice are not 2 separate things. They're not, it's not like there's awakening time and then there's like me time, you know? Peter Park time and then no self or something time or something. And it's not, those aren't the 2 things. And it's interesting because when I was in a cabin, I read some Zen texts, and there's a very influential Chinese Zen master named Da Hui who says something like, a lot of people think I teach people not to sit and meditate in silence. I do teach people how to sit and meditate. I'm paraphrasing. I do teach people to sit and meditate. I just don't want them only doing that. I just want them practicing Zen in everything they're doing. Whether they're walking or eating or talking to people or whatever, always practicing Zen. Not just when you're sitting quietly. He also says something like, imagine a person hitting a bell and everyone gathering in silence to sit in a room in silence. Is there a more somber image you could imagine? It's sort of mocking, at that time, sort of. People who thought, oh, I just sit here and somehow I get enlightened if I'm just silent and I just stop everything. I just become like a stone or a rock or a piece of concrete or something. The point of meditation is to become like a rock. Just, you have no awareness and you just, no ideas or thoughts or no caring or compassion, just a dead piece of wood. And so there's a lot of Zen literature mocking this idea of, misguided idea of the point of this path is to become a rock, basically. I don't know if we've gotten there yet. There's a very nice talk by Soryu back in January where he talked about circling and said 10% of circling is really good, and I don't know, like 80% of it or 90% of it is like kind of, I forget what he said, emotional indulgence or something. Then he says it's good because most of you, as Koshin was mentioning, have emotional asceticism. So it might be good to overcorrect into indulgence for a while. But hopefully we can increase that 10% more so that circling is more and more like an awakening practice. And so, as Stephen pointed out yesterday, I think a lot of us have incorrectly had the orientation of, oh, it's circling time, yay, we get to hang out and talk and feel stuff and, whatever. I don't like that. I don't want circling to be like that here. It should be taken as seriously as meditation practice. This 2-hour period could radically discover new patterns and try out a new pattern that's more healthy and wholesome that I don't feel like I trust anyone to do that with. That I rarely get the group time to try that out. And that will impact every relationship I have going forward. That's how we should approach our practice. This really matters, and it's such a rare treat to have a group of people willing to put up with each other, I'm half joking, but put up with each other and also have the vulnerability and the courage and the bravery and the willingness and the trust and the faith to do that kind of work with each other. It's very rare. There are definitely people that might say, if you really care about awakening or something, then you should probably just seclude yourself, and it's way too much of a challenge to engage your ego or engage yourself in relationship or even in all the responsibility things we do, like fundraising and QuickBooks and stuff like that. But that's not what we say here. Here we don't do that. There are times when people like myself might go into solitary practice to exclusively focus in that sort of dimension. But here we care more about the integration of how do you make life and practice and being able to be effective in the world, support and be with awakening practice, insight, spirituality. And as long as these are two separate things, then you've basically created a world where only those who are privileged get to do this, and everyone else has to, do responsibility. So That's not what we're doing here. I'm not saying we're categorically better than anyone or that anyone has the right approach or something. Different approaches, different styles, valuing different things more, but that's how we do it here. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. Any last burning questions, shares, interest?
I'm kind of curious about if you have like a buzzwordy or like quick definition of integrity.
Why?
Like, I find myself like more and more confused about what integrity is, and also finding it's more and more important to me. And so I'm like looking for something to be like, what is integrity right now? To like be able to recall.
Anyone have any wisdom in this question?
I have the same question.
Hmm.
I don't have an answer.
That's good. Aaron?
I realized that I've been thinking about this too. I think
Oh, what?
I've been thinking about is like how quickly you how do I explain it? Like when you realize that something you're doing is unskillful, how quickly do you pivot? Or how fast do you reorient? It's like a really
I have some sutra notes here. I wonder if any of them answer this question, but probably not. Well, this is a sort of a profound question, so you all should talk about it very often. Its integrity is a huge part of what we do here. But if I were to give my off the gut answer, I would say I can point at it, but it's very hard to give a definition. So these are some pointing at it symptoms, maybe. So one would be, am I doing what I said I would do? If I promised or said I would committed to doing something, do I do it even if it's hard or circumstances changed such that it's much more difficult or painful or costly for me to do it? Do I still do it? Or at least check in with that person to find understanding. Is my body, speech, and mind, my intentions, my actions, my speaking match? A lot of times in circling, or for those who are leaders here, if those are out of alignment, oftentimes people can feel that and feels out of integrity. And Aaron said, Buddha often said that, there's a great sutras, everyone should read it, that there's this monk who didn't like the fact that the Buddha made this new rule that you're not allowed to eat in the afternoon. And so he didn't do it. He just didn't do it. And not only did he not do it, he didn't bring himself to his teacher, the Buddha, and confess his mistake for a long time until his friends, the other monks, told him, it's really bad for you to A, not be following your teacher's guidance, and then B, not confessing. You're basically out of integrity, and you're breaking your wholesome pattern. Because this is a pattern. If you're, say, a monastic, and you're committing yourself to a certain way of life, and then you're out of integrity with it, you're creating a new pattern where it's okay to be out of integrity with what you think is important. So you should really talk to the Buddha. And so he confesses, he goes to the Buddha and says, sorry, I was really selfish, and I thought, who are you to tell me when to eat? My body is this way, so I really need food in the afternoon. And anyway, when I eat, I feel better, and it helps my practice, and yada, yada, yada. So he goes on about. And then I imagine that they kind of chilled out. They did the confession, and then they're just kind of hanging out. And then the monk is like, I don't remember exactly. I'm like kind of paraphrasing, like doing my own spin on the story because I don't remember the exact details. And the monk kind of goes, kind of says like, you've been trying to teach me for a long time, haven't you? And the Buddha's like, yes. I've been constantly teaching you and telling you what to do, and you don't listen, and you don't follow. And he says, oh, sorry. And then he goes, how come back in the day when you first taught, there were very few rules? We didn't have this rule about eating, and a lot of people got enlightened. There were a lot of arhats just popping up like popcorn or something. And now, years later, we have all of these rules, and there's so few enlightened people. It's not like popcorn anymore. It's like the end of the popcorn cycle and just a few pops every few minutes. What's going on? Maybe we should have less rules, right? And then the Buddha says something like, the rules were made in response to help protect people from their defilements, their bad patterns or habits or whatever. I don't remember the sutra very well, so you should read it to see if I'm accurate. It's either in that sutra or another sutra, and he says that if you realize you're out of integrity, if you're doing something wrong, you should abandon that immediately and do the wholesome thing. If you don't do that, then you're kind of like that monk, and you might not get you're going to travel very slowly. So you should. When I was in the cabin and I was letting go of stuff, and then I would start grabbing onto something, I was like, oh God, no, do not grab onto that. Freedom I'm experiencing right now is way more better than anything I could grab onto. And that let me just sort of let go of a lot of stuff, because it's like, it was like, if it turns out I shouldn't be friends with this person, that's okay. If it turns out I shouldn't ever circle again, that's okay. Don't want to grab onto anything. And so, that's sort of a tangent, sorry. So, integrity, this all relates somehow, I'm sure, because it's my brain, but do what you said you would do. Your body, your actions, what you do, your speaking, and your intentions are in alignment. They match. In a community like this, you listen to your wiser peers and teacher when they tell you, hey, you're breaking a rule right now. Do you energetically, quickly resolve that, or do you go into, well, I was tired, so blah, 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 or, I worked really late the previous night, so blah, 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 Are you happy that you now get the opportunity? Oh, this is how it connects. Are you happy now that you get to let go of something? That, this would usually hit my ego and make me reactive and go into patterning, but it would be so much faster and so much better for everyone if I just did the thing. It's like a very Taoist way of approaching it. Like Soryu back in the day when I was one of you would correct me really harshly, often more than anyone else and way more strongly than anyone else, because he knew I could take it. And so then he would say, you're drumming wrong. You're supposed to finish when everyone's at the table, doing such a bad job. And I'll go, yes, I'm doing a bad job. I'll do better next time. And then what are you going to say to that afterwards, Yeah, right, you are a bad person. You're not going to... It's like you just hit a blanket and you just waft it in and then back, and then you go. But if the person says, well, I didn't know that I'm supposed to do that, then, okay, now you've just given something to... I can respond to that now. But if someone just sort of takes it and goes, oh, sorry, I forgot I'm supposed to cook breakfast. Thank you for telling me. You know? Suddenly everyone just feels better, you know? So energetically, happily finding out, oh, I was out of integrity, that doesn't mean I'm a bad person or something. That just means I get an opportunity to live in integrity now. That's great.